Hey, what's up, guys? We're rebuilding the Detroit Pistons in NBA 2K. They need a ton of help. We're at the end of the real life 24 season, and we got a lot of work to do, so let's get into it. But before we do that, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. We are always doing sports gaming here, focused on realism. Now, it's up to you if you want to wait until the finals are done to do a start today. There's pros and cons to that. I'll let you decide, but I've gone through and I've simulated the finals, and we are already into the offseason. And so going from the NBA finals that I simulated and into the offseason now, this is now my universe. I'm not worried about matching real life anymore, even with the retirements, even with the, say, draft order from the lottery. I'm not too concerned about it. Things are going to change. The draft classes aren't going to match exactly to real life. A quick look at the staff retirements. We see Greg Popovich has retired, and we have a couple Hall of Fame inductees, as well as some notable jersey retirements. The league meetings I just let organically happen, and so this time we do have an approval of 13 players from each conference now being named to the All-Star team. Now, the draft lottery, as I mentioned, I just let it go. I just went with what the game was going to give us here. I could probably go through and manually make all these trades if I really wanted to, but when I was doing that, it's pretty time consuming. There's not like a full on, while there's a trade override in the game, you can't just like easily swap picks back and forth. So we just went with it. I'm okay. Again, we're creating different storylines. Guys, when you look at these draft classes a little closer, not all the players are exactly lining up where they're slotted to go in real life. Anyway, so you're going to have some just kind of natural change from reality. As far as staff signing, truthfully, this isn't one of my favorite parts of the game. I like the setup. I like that we have a front office and we have coaching and we have scouting and we have a medical staff, but I just don't love kind of the tediousness of it. It really kind of like the sorting and just kind of going through the different positions and the pros and cons of each person. It's just not really enjoyable for me. So I've just kind of ripped through this. I won't bore you with it, but basically we've maxed out our number of offers and we are doing our best to fill out our staff of 17. I think at most we'll end up with 15 after this first day of staff signing. So I mentioned we're rebuilding the Pistons, of course, and this is going to be a slow process. I'm going to get into more of that in a second. But to start with, our staff, what we're trying to fill out is really just a handful of different positions. We're looking to get a physio, a strength trainer, on the scouting side, a foreign and domestic scout, and then as far as coaches, a guard guru, and then an assistant GM because I feel like I should just be forced to use one of my staff members as that. So just to make it a little bit more challenging, I also will only sign people to like the positions that they're slotted for. So like a domestic scout, I won't sign a foreign scout for that role. It's got to be an actual domestic scout. Strength trainer, I'm not going to hire like a fatigue trainer, for instance. So I try to make sure they match up. I'm looking at badges, I'm looking at ratings. Jumping to day two, not only am I looking at the position to match up, but I'm also looking for a particular position to have a badge that matches that position. So, for instance, Alvin Long here, he's our physio hire we're hoping for. He has the physio badge. So the staff's coming together pretty nicely. Everyone that we've offered a contract to has signed. We had a few others that we looked to add on day two, and they, of course, are still mulling that over. So far, so good. So there we have it. The staff is filled out. I can just click through to let you see what we ended up going with. Again, the focus on rebuilding this Pistons team. I do need to talk about kind of that roadmap here in just a little bit because it's not such a cut and dry rebuild with this team. And the reason it's not so cut and dry is that we don't have a first round pick in 2025. So we do end up with the fifth pick just like in real life here in 2024, and we have two second round picks that, of course, aren't really worth a whole lot. And then we have two in 2025. And so it's hard to rebuild when you don't have a first round pick. I don't think this team is going to be as bad maybe as they were in real life this previous season. I think there's still some really nice pieces. Of course, we're talking about Cade Cunningham. I think Jalen Duren is another guy, at least in this season here, in this particular franchise we're doing, that is a piece we can build around. And those two are kind of the focal point here. I'm going to get into more of the roster later, but I wanted just to kind of show you why this isn't such a cut and dry rebuild. As for the roster, it's not terrible, as I've mentioned. Cunningham, of course, franchise player. We're going to need to resign him after this season. I really like Marcus Sasser. I think he could a potential six man on this roster. Ivy is kind of a crossroads player for us. I like Ivy. He's really athletic, but I think he's a guy we may look to move, especially considering we don't have a first next year. He's still just 22, so like, what am I going to get with another first round pick? Probably another Jaden Ivy, but I think it's worth looking into. I actually really do like Quentin Grimes. Ignore that -4. He is hurt. I'm not quite sure. It says for the season, and I'm not sure if that's for like this season or the previous season. Although now it's saying none, so maybe that's a good sign there. We are going to be letting a lot of players just walk, like Fournier, who has an option. We're not going to be signing him. I really like Oscar Thompson, both in real life. I like him a lot here on our team as well. Simone Fontecchio, I think is how you say his name. He is a guy that we could look to resign. I think he's just a nice like offensive player to come off the bench. That could be really nice. Isaiah Stewart signed an extension, so he's around, which I do like. And a couple centers I really liked. I mentioned Duran, who I think is just a core piece for this team as we move forward. And I actually don't mind James Wiseman. I think he'd be a really nice player to have for some depth at center. So he is another player that we're looking at potentially resigning. So we'll just have to kind of see what happens here. We have a lot of cap space, so that's going to make this part of the rebuild interesting and fun. And speaking of contracts and salary cap space, I can't quite figure out the screen because it looks like some things are updated but not. So like James Wiseman making 24 and some change, but here he's not showing anything for a contract. And then you have like Jaden Ivey, who looks to have a team option for 15 million, but it's actually a team option for like 8. So I don't know what's going on with the screen. It's kind of weird because then like certain players it is accurate, like with Cade Cunningham here. So I don't know. It's kind of weird to go into a job like this when you don't exactly know what you're looking at for the numbers, when the numbers are pretty vital to this role. But regardless of the financial situation, what we're looking at next is prepping for the draft. It's getting familiar with this real life draft class and knowing that we have the 5th pick, and just we definitely have some holes. I mean, this is a pretty bad team. We had one of the worst, if not the worst, record in the NBA last year. And so we have some work to do, and it's going to start by getting ready for the draft. As far as going through the pre-draft workouts, I have a few things I'm looking at. I mean, certainly we're looking at the player profiles, but I'm also looking at their performances in the pre-draft workouts themselves. So I'm looking at the shooting percentages and just kind of who's leading different categories, whether it's like strength categories or speed categories and things like this, but also understanding that's a really small sample size. I mean, 25 shots, you're probably talking about like 2 games worth of feedback. So it's not something you should like necessarily rest your hat on, but it's a video game. It's there for a reason. So I do try to look for things. So I've made my list as kind of a combination of metrics and also just player profile information. So you saw that I was going through the pre-draft workouts, and from there we have done now the private workouts. And this is the list of players that I brought in sorted by position. They range from late second or late first, early second round picks like Bronny James, all the way up to guys that would probably fall around that 5 range. I've kind of ignored some of the top players that maybe go like first or second because it felt like a bit of a waste of a scouting opportunity. I'm not going to be trading up. We're not in a position. We actually can't trade our pick at all because the Pistons have traded next year's pick, and the NBA has the rule about trading back-to-back picks. So we are picking 5th. We're stuck with it. Maybe we pick more, but we will be picking 5th. And so really just kind of going through and looking at all positions. I am looking for best available player. And I can tell you right now, there's a player that really stands out to me, and I'm kind of surprised by it because he wasn't really someone we had pretty high on the list originally. But I'm trusting my scouts here, and Reed Shepherd is, I think right now, who I'd end up picking. He is a 6'2" point guard out of Kentucky, 20 years old. He's a kind of 3-and-D player, but really what sold me on this guy is seeing this A-plus potential. Now, that's according to my scouts. I have to trust them. We have a new staff that we've hired. But this is hard to ignore, and it's not like a big stretch as I just kind of flip through and we see where he's kind of being slotted to rank. I mean, the Sporting News has him going 8th. The 2K draft projection has him going 8th. And then NBA.com has him going 5th. So it's you could argue it's a slight stretch, but to me, like, he's certainly not going to be there if we pick later in the draft. And so you get the guy that you want, and it's really hard to ignore. The ceiling says all NBA. The floor is a Steve Kerr starter. I mean, that's pretty darn good. No significant weaknesses, no medical conditions. And I mean, this is wild, right? He's played 30 games, and he has a 3-point percentage of 50%. Like, it's just everything matches. Like, I've seen some players who are like, "Ooh, the scouting looks good," but maybe the stats don't match, or things like this. But right now, if he falls to us, Reed Shepard is going to be the pick. Before I show you how Reed would fit into the Pistons lineup, because you're probably thinking it's not really a great fit. This is what the entire board for us looks like. This is our team board. I just have them ranked by the Sporting News rankings. And again, just some players I really like. I really like Cody Williams. If he does fall, it's a player that maybe we give some consideration to. He just looks to be like just a really, really strong, athletic, offensive player. It'd be a really, really nice fit. I think he would complement Oscar Thompson really well, who's more of like a defensive small forward. I just don't think he's going to be there, and we don't have him fully scouted. But again, he'd be a really nice pick. Say if he's there and maybe Reed Shepard isn't, I mean that would be a nice fallback. I liked Robert Dillingham. Again, all NBA. There's a lot of players who had this all NBA ceiling in the floor starter, and I think that's just because they're not fully scouted yet. So of course that range is still a little bit big. Alexander Sarr looks to be a really nice player. I like Stefan Cassell as another nice player, and there's a lot. Everybody on here I do like for various reasons. Looking at some guys who could be fits in the second round, I really like Devin Carter if he's going to be there. I think he would just be a really, really nice complementary piece at the very least. He's got some really nice rating. Again, kind of a 3 and D kind of player, but he would be really, really nice to add into the mix, especially if we do end up moving Ivy. Let's see. I like Johnny Murphy, another small forward, and again, he's kind of a more of a perimeter defender, but a nice player there. I like his size. I mean, he can play the shooting guard position at 6'9", so I did like Johnny Murphy. I like Eves Mystery. Bronny James, I do like. He's not exactly what I usually look for in a point guard. And so, yeah, you can just see there's a lot of different names that I just wanted to at least put on the screen. Now, at the Pistons roster, if we were to take point guard Reed Shepard, we're picking a player that's plays really probably our deepest position right now. I really like Marcus Sasser, as I've said before. I like Cunningham. And so it would open up an opportunity for us to possibly make a move for a first round pick next year, something that I really, really want to add into the mix. Point being is I'm not worried about the position. I want the best player. And if I have a player scouted, even though it's maybe 89% accuracy, as an A plus potential, that's going to be hard to pass up, especially at pick 5 if he falls, which is looking like he probably will. And so that's a bridge I will cross later. If we trade Sasser, I mean, I have offers. I think New Orleans would trade us a first round pick for him. That could work out. He's got a really nice cheap deal, but we're pretty good on cap space, so that could work. Don't sell completely on trading Cade Cunningham. It's possible. It's not. He's not signed long term. He's going to cost a lot. He's a great player. Of course, I'd rather keep him over Sasser, but it's an opportunity, and so I don't mind it. We can do some other things here in the draft later on, but right now, how it's looking, if it kind of falls the way I'm thinking, we're going to be going point guard in the first round, even though it's one of my 1 or 2 top positions on the team already. Here is what the trade finder pulled up for the Pelicans. Again, it would mostly be to Sasser for their first in 25. Maybe I would try to even just drop these off. I don't really need Liddell here. So that's the trade for Sasser. And when I shopped Cade Cunningham, there's really not much that I'm loving. No one's offering us a first round pick for this. And so if I had to do a deal, maybe it'd be something like this with the Rockets. But I think overall, I'd be keeping Cunningham and moving Sasser. Well, having said all that, it's time for the draft. Let's jump ahead to the 5th pick. Wow. Well, we have a development because as you saw, we just had Williams go second, which is not a surprise. Reed Shepard goes third to the Blazers. So I don't think I was very far off thinking he would be our pick that at 5. Ooh, I'm a bit bummed about that. So we're going to have to see what we need to do here at pick 5. So here we are, pick 5. Looking at what's left, we have a lot of C plus players, which is kind of normal. There's only usually maybe 1 or 2 guys that are above that. Scouting, we only have 2 players that are even high enough to actually show their potential. They're both shooting guards. We have Cassell, who's 6'6", and we have Dillingham, who's 6'1". I'm a little bit worried about that, even though he can play point guard. I'm kind of leaning towards Cassell. Of course, there's real life lineage there with his dad, I believe, playing in the NBA. I guess that was his dad, Sam Cassell. And I like that he's 6'6". We'd have two guards that are 6'6" that could play next to each other, which is pretty exciting. You look here, he can score a little bit, especially on the inside, which is nice. Kind of works nicely with some maybe inside other threats that we have on the inside. Perimeter defense is good playmaker. So again, he's a nice backcourt guy who can penetrate, and he's also very athletic. So super exciting there. I think what really sold me on him is he's the only player I see that has this, and again, it's not fully scouted, but the ceiling of a Hall of Fame. That's pretty awesome. No significant weaknesses. He's past his physical, of course, nothing there. I like Dillingham too, but it's just I don't know, 6'1" as a shooting guard. And I don't edit players. I know he could probably play point guard, but I don't know if the AI is smart enough to put him in because we're going to be doing a lot of quick simming in this series. I just don't know about that. So, and I just overall I think Cassell's going to be a better player. So he is going to be our pick at 5. If you kind of look and see where he is slotted, I guess if we just go and maybe look at the like draft projections, and we can kind of see who's up at the top. And so we have 1, 5, and 4 the rankings here, and there's really nobody that's going to have like a lower cumulative number if you kind of add those together, which is a good barometer for kind of where you're picking and what you're doing. So I'm pretty comfortable taking Cassell. That's what we're going to do here with pick 5. The pick is in 6'6" guard out of Connecticut, Stefan Cassell. Next pick, we have our first trade, and I'm just going to rip through here. We'll just get through the first round quickly and get to our next pick. Okay, so we are now up with pick number 45. We're into the second round. Let's take a look. Well, we have one player left that we have any sort of scouting on, and it's center power forward Zavonimir Ivisic. And 7'2", 234, and it's a pretty good spot here. We are going to be taking this guy. You can see his kind of rankings at pick 45 looks to be like a pretty good value. Again, nothing to write home about when you're talking second round picks in the NBA. But you can see the draft projections kind of have him still as a pretty good pick there. If we kind of look at his makeup, he's kind of just an old school center. Can score a little bit on the inside. Also got some mid-range scoring ability, actually even better than his inside. So that's nice. Really looking at post defense rebounding. It's got a little bit of potential. So for me, it's a potential project here. Gives us a little bit of depth at center, but pretty easy pick. I like his positional flexibility as well. Zavonimir Ivisic is our pick. All right, well, here we go. Our last pick, pick number 55. Not expecting a whole lot, but let's take a look. We're going to be going with center forward Adis Mari. I think that's how you say his name, out of UCLA. Super late in the second round here. We're not expecting a lot. It's kind of expected to be picked around here. Of course, the ceiling and floor doesn't mean a whole lot because we don't have a ton scouted on him. So the range is enormous, but I do think he's an interesting prospect who could be something that we could possibly work. I mean, that inside scoring, if that improves, that'd be nice. I really like the playmaking. I mean, you can think if he can kind of back guys down and maybe kick out for some threes. Post defense and rebounding have potential as well. His potential comes out as pretty terrible, I guess, is the risk here. But he's 7'3". Again, we're not really expecting much. So we are going to go here with the pick, and that's going to finish off the draft for the Pistons. Looking through the league, it seems every single team declines their second round picks, and that's what it's recommended we do here. So we're just going to go with that. I think part of it too, we just don't really want to tie up money. Two guys who are rated 69, probably not going to break into the league anytime soon. So we're just going to roll with that. As far as pending team options for the Pistons, really easy. Yes to Duran, yes to Ivy, no to Fournier. Well, we've gotten through the draft, and we are really into the depths here of this Pistons rebuild. We still have free agency to go through. I've started to preview that now. We've gone through our qualifying offers for the team, and we're really just kind of in that transition phase between the draft and free agency. So there's a lot more to come. We're going to get into free agency in episode 2. I'm keeping these shorter, and we're going to be jumping in to seasons that we'll be simulating quickly to see how fast we can get this Pistons team. So 24, 25 seasons right around the corner. We'll be doing more. Guys, thanks for watching the video. Give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. I'm excited to get this Pistons team rebuilt, and I'll see you next time.